anyone could follow her, and she's very, very much an anomaly. I mean, she is a game-changing model. I mean, she's one of maybe sort of 3 models I can think of in the past 100 years who have even been anywhere close to what she's managed to do. However, there are a lot of similarities between a Kate Moss and a Twiggy. You know, in fact, that whole sort of petite model, boyish figure, gamine frame. It's something that they have a lot of similarities. In fact, the big eyes, just the way they look. In fact, they've often been referenced together, and they've even worked together. And I know that Twiggy and Kate are friends. Kate would even call Twiggy on set every once in a while. But in the same way that at that particular moment, rather than the same way, in the opposite way, to your point, in the 60s, when Twiggy became a huge success, it wasn't because she was boyish, okay? It wasn't because she was skinny. And Twiggy was accused of creating a bad body image as well, by the way, in those times. And that's not why she was picked. She was not selected because they were looking for an androgynous waif model. She was specifically selected because of her authenticity, because of her realness, because kids and the youth and the pop culture of that particular moment wanted a real person. They wanted someone who was down to earth, who they could represent. In fact, even the fashion photographers, David Bailey and what have you, didn't want to photograph Twiggy. They weren't interested. They wanted the sexy girls with the curves and the hips and all the rest of it. They thought, who's this boyish girl? And it's well documented. In fact, it didn't matter though. She was the model of the people. Now, go to Kate Moss, and this was interesting because this is kind of my era of modeling. I modeled myself late 80s, early 90s, and I remember modeling with Kate Moss, and I distinctly remember she was only 14 years old. We were on a train together, we were going to a shoot, it was for ID magazine. I was nervous, it was a big deal. Kate was new, and I remember sort of asking her a bunch of questions, and she would always just answer sort of super coolly back at me. She had a little milk carton, she was drinking milk out of a straw, and just chatting with me. And the whole time through the shoot, I remember watching her distinctly. She was never ruffled. No matter what was said, no matter what was happening, she was cool. A very cool cucumber. One of the things about her throughout her entire career is how absolutely effortless it is. And I think that's one of the reasons why she has, continued to be so successful. It's because she doesn't try hard. But that's not to mean that she doesn't do an incredible job and work hard, but she doesn't have to try hard. And I think we are all craving for that ease. Every one of us wants to be natural, wants to be relaxed, wants to be comfortable in our skin, does not want to be nervous up here. We want to be relaxed. We wish we could be. She is that person. And no matter what, and no matter how bad the press has been, no matter what her tumbles have been in her career, she's ignored it. She's been above it, or she's been below it, or whatever she has done, she has not addressed it. She has never apologized. And that's a very interesting thing, because we live in a society that constantly wants to be, please, if you apologize, the public will love you. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have everything. Like me. She doesn't actually care whether you like her or not. And that's incredibly sexy, by the way. It's that classic thing of like, hey, take me or leave me. And I think that's something that is very hard to come by. And I don't know whether there's anyone else. It's hard to tell. I've not seen anyone, personally. I've got to tell you. There are faces that look like her. People say, oh, Cara Delevingne, this, that, everything else. I don't think so.
She's very enigmatic. She doesn't talk to the press. So she always has a very high level of allure. So no matter what goes on with her, you're never going to know. And then she has that ability as a model to change, to transform herself into a character. And she's often, actually, that's one thing she has talked about, how she is a pretender. She is someone when she is modeling. Switching to another icon. I think this might just start. Okay. We have to talk about Sex in the City. So here we are in New York, and that show undeniably put a spotlight on style, and Sarah Jessica Parker, whose shoe line is JP, I don't know if everybody saw it this morning, had a full-page ad in the New York Times. So my question is, why did the fashion and the show make the world fall in love with New York City and Sarah Jessica Parker, and put her name on the map and this town as well?
In the previous book that I did, 100 Unforgettable Dresses, we actually did a section on Sarah. I think there is no one on the red carpet who enjoys getting dressed up more than she does. There's no one who has a better time wearing pretty clothes, getting pretty things, showing up. And the funny thing is, she is not a beauty. by any stretch of the imagination. She's not. She doesn't have classic features. She's not a beautiful woman. And I think it's one of the reasons why people immediately, men and women immediately identified with her, because there was a reality there. She was that girl, but it was also part of Sex in the City. And that's where the appeal was. Okay, the extraordinary thing about Sex in the City, and the chapter in the book is called My One and Only, because Carrie has one real love in that book. And it's not Mr. Big, and it's not Aiden. It's New York. What Sex in the City did, you gotta remember, let's take it back in the time. I remember when I was growing up and I was living in New York in the 80s, New York was dirty, New York was scary, New York was dangerous, it was too fast. And people would come to New York and you would hear parents, nobody wanted to come visit here. Nobody wanted to come here. It was, you would travel and be, oh my God, how can you live in New York? It must be awful. I mean, I actually liked it better, dirtier, and sexier, but that's me, okay? What Sex in the City did in this remarkable way was all of a sudden turn the lens and put this spotlight on this city that said, no, this place is bright and shiny. This place is full of possibility. It is full of happiness. It is full of sex. It is full of possibility. And more important, it is full of all these things for grown-ups. And specifically, grown-up single women. Remember, all the women in Sex and the City, it's not Mary Tyler Moore getting, it's not somebody, it's not that girl, it's not somebody getting out of school and starting out. These are women who already had a life in their 30s and their 40s, who supposedly, a big part of the culture that runs after the young models had forgotten about. And what Darren Star said, we're focusing on the ladies, and we're going to show ladies the same way they show guys. Having a good time, being independent, carving careers, having sex, talking about sex. The conversations around that table were no conversations any woman had ever heard, or I mean, they had heard amongst themselves and their friends, but they'd never seen that woman depicted in real life. And what it said was, this is all possible in New York. And suddenly, New York became the place to be. Suddenly, everywhere that Carrie went became the place to be. Magnolia Bakery is a mediocre bakery, at best. Okay? There are lines around the block wherever it goes. Why? That's where they went. That's where she went. Manolo. Take it, Jimmy Choo, all the brands, Starbucks, all the brands that they talk about, everything that became associated with the four women in Sex and the City became something every woman who wanted to be cool and grown up wanted to have. And all of it was possible here. And I think that the sort of iconic moment, the real key moment, I think that made everybody fall in love with Sex and the City forever, was at the very start of the 5th season. And it was right after September 11th. We were beat up, we were slugged, we were hurt. It was a tough place to live. It wasn't a happy place to live. And the first episode starts out actually with all four women single, having been dumped, divorced, separated, whatever. They're all down. Actually, Carrie starts, she goes to a movie by herself. And that, which of course, one of her, who is I just drew a blank on the good girl. Not Miranda. Charlotte. Charlotte's horrified that you could possibly go to the movies alone. Okay? But it's something Carrie loves to do, because New Yorkers do go to the movies alone all the time. They eventually get Carrie out of her shell and they talk her into going, it's Fleet Week in New York. Remember? It's Fleet Week, because they can all of the sailors, so they all go. I mean, Miranda can't, she has a kid, so she has to go home. But Carrie, Samantha, they all go. But Carrie's not really into it as much as the other two are. But she meets one sailor who actually helped her into a cab earlier in the day. And really, it's actually Dan Sujata, great looking actor. And she was just about to leave, and he asks her to dance. And she says, okay. And Charlotte had said to her earlier that she had read somewhere that you could only have 2 great loves in your life. And she had Big and Aiden, so figured maybe she's done. And they had a great time dancing, and at one point, she asks him, how many great loves do you think you can have? And he says 1. And he asks her to stay, and he does. And he says, but by the way, he says, this town of yours, he says, this is my first time here in New York, and I don't know how you can live here. He said, the dirt, because this place is so not for me. And at that point, Carrie gets up and kisses him on the forehead and says, good night. And he says, where are you going? And she says, it's okay, I have to leave. And you watch her walk down the street where she lives, and she talks, there's a voiceover about how maybe you can only have just one real love in this life. And that maybe New York, that's my love, and I can't have anybody talking shit about my love. And I think about my boyfriend, and I think every single New Yorker who watched that episode that night burst into tears. And I think that's what made, and a show, that's how a show like that galvanizes a population to fall in love with the place. New York now has 55 million tourists a year. We are a larger attraction than Disney World.
Nigel. Nowadays, many models use social media to bring their persona into the spotlight. Do you believe Twitter, Instagram, and the like play a significant role in propelling forward their careers in a truly meaningful way?
I think there's no doubt. I mean, I think at this point, social media has actually revolutionized not just, obviously, all of us in our lives, but certainly the fashion industry is a completely different business. Fashion Week itself, I mean, hey, today was the last day of Fashion Week. Fashion Week is nothing like what it used to look like just a couple of years ago, in fact. What you're seeing is looks and complete catwalks being taped and videoed and sent down, Instagram and Snapchat and everything else, and being beamed all over the world in real time.
Before the show is over.
Before the show is over. Even before the show's been on, by the way. People are taking pictures backstage of the outfits, and people are claiming, I want to buy this, I want to buy that. Ready to wear. These entire collections are being purchased as they're seen in real time, so that whole collection is sold before it actually leaves the runway. We've never seen anything like it. So absolutely, fashion itself has changed, and the models, listen, there are now model agencies, most of the big ones have divisions which are specifically around how many numbers, what your numbers are like in social media. So if you have over 50,000 followers in Instagram, you can approach the agency, that division, and if they like the way you look as well and all the rest of it, they'll take you on. If you don't have the numbers, you can't get into that particular division. So it's specifically around social media campaigns, which so many advertisers realize now, they can't afford a big campaign in a big magazine. It's going to cost them $100,000 a page, XYZ. However, they can do $10,000 with a model from social media, and they can get access to a million followers and all the rest of it.
Carly Kloss is a beautiful woman, but the number of followers she has, and her best friendship there with Taylor Swift, between the two of them, there's a reason why she opens and closes almost every show, because she guarantees 250,000 people are going to watch this show.
At least, absolutely at least. I mean, and also from a client's perspective, if you shoot an advertising campaign, for example, on Cara Delevingne, who's got 14 million followers on Instagram, you can run not just the behind-the-scenes pictures, but an actual, the ads themselves on her social media. You pay her, of course, but then they run the ads. And then one of the interesting things we're seeing now is advertisers can run the ads before they make them. They pick the one they want to put in, as their big print ad, and see which one is liked the most. So they don't have to say, with their sort of magic eye, that's the picture that's going to be the major campaign.
The public does the editing for them.
The public is doing the editing. So, back when, in the history of fashion, editors, photographers, designers, they're the ones who picked girls out of obscurity, really, and placed them on the map. You heard over and over again, whether it's Anna Wintour or Diana Vreeland or Avedon or whoever it might have been, putting a model on the map. Nowadays, it's you and me. Which is both terrifying and extraordinarily empowering as well, because it's opened up the business like we've never seen it before.
That actually leads me into my next question for both of you again. Not intentionally, it's just perfect coincidence. The Costume Institute, the Met, just recently closed its exhibit Through the Looking Glass, East Meets West, and the attendance was more than 800,000 people. which surpassed that of the McQueen show by about 200,000 people. And it was the Costume Institute's biggest show ever. And I am going to say this. Hal didn't think I should say this because I'm not giving a book report, but I'm a book editor and I can't help myself. So I'm going to give this one line, which is that what I thought was amazing was that not only was it the Costume Institute's biggest show ever, but it was the 5th biggest exhibit at the Met, in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's entire history, which I really tells you something, because until very recently, nobody cared that much about fashion. Not that much. So why do you think fashion is surging in terms of its popularity with the general public? Why are we seeing such enormous turnouts at this show? And this show didn't have any kind of scandal attached to it. I mean, of course, McQueen, as we all know, had died in a tragic manner, and I think his work was very dark, and I think that drove some people to the show. But this was a whole other ball of wax, as they say. So what do you guys think?
I'll disagree with you on something. I don't think people didn't care about fashion. They did. But the influence of fashion happened in a much slower way. Okay? No, let's say you take a film like Bonnie and Clyde, opened in 1968, and before then, you couldn't get a woman to wear a midi skirt for love nor money.
People couldn't afford fashion either.
Exactly.
That's another part of it. It's actually people having the money to actually access it.
But it's also when you look at whether it's a movie film. The thing is, everything happened on a much slower basis then. As the film the film started out, and the initial response was people hated the film. It was super violent. Nobody wanted to know about it. And then Pauline Kael did an incredible review, and then Time magazine reversed itself. Warren Beatty took it to film festivals, and suddenly the film made 10 times its money and became an unbelievable stylish seller. I mean, one of the smart things they did in that film was when they did all those 20s and 30s fashion, was Theodora Van Runkel did. If you notice, when you look at the film with Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway, who were ridiculously beautiful at that time, they don't wear 30s and 30s hairstyle or makeup. Faye refused, and Warren wouldn't cut his hair that way, so they looked modern. So they literally became examples of how people could look that way. But back then, in the 60s and the 70s, when a style or a fashion was created, it happened much more slowly. Just like Nigel was talking before. When I started in this business, when you went to a fashion show, it was very simple. 200 to 300 people sat in a fashion show. Okay, there were buyers and there were editors there. None of you saw any of it. You waited 6 months while we sat there and we filtered. We chose our things, the dresses that we wanted to put in the magazine. The buyers went and put their pieces in to go to the store. And then when it went into the store, when it came out in the issue, you saw the fashion. And then you got to decide whether you wanted to wear it or not. Well, you now see it as fast as I do. You've made your judgment. You're done. Styles are, and as fast as you see them, the people who do fashion at a lower price knock it off, and it's in H&M and Zara before the designers get it into the store. So fashion now happens fast. And now because fashion happens fast, now people realize the importance of fashion, and they can access it. They can get to it immediately. Also, fashion infects everything. Like you take an example like in New York City, okay? New York is different than in other cities in the sense that when it comes to your social structure, you don't play golf, we're not going to play squash, you're certainly not coming to my house. Okay? Where do we meet everybody? We meet everybody in restaurants. What do you do in your restaurant? You get dressed up to go out and eat in a restaurant. So fashion becomes part of our social structure. And those elements become, when you walk down the street, you see fashion in New York. It's in every window. It's all over the place. It's Instagram. It's everywhere you go. It's indelible. You can't separate it now. In fact, I think all of our culture, I think it's the same reason why we're fascinated about food. The thing is, all of these things become immediately accessible now, and so basically pop culture becomes one continuous cycle. So it's not that people were less interested then, it's just that they have greater access now. And because they have such access, they also have access to the information as well, which gets them more interested to go to see an exhibit, such as the East Meets West one.
Do you agree with it?